name's Ashley Ellington, and I'm the Education and Outreach Specialist here at Gladney. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. When the training's over, you will receive a pop-up for the questionnaire. If you're needing CEUs, please be sure to fill this out, or certificates of completion. If you do miss it, it will come in your email sometime tomorrow. And then those CEUs do take about 5 to 7 business days to get to you guys. And then if you have any questions at all, please put them in the chat. And I know Libby and Marina will get to them for you. If you heard Libby and Marina speak with us last year, you know they're amazing. We had wonderful feedback. So I know you guys will enjoy this training. So Libby and Marina, I'll let y'all take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if it'll work. Let me know if you can see it.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay. Oh, there was just a floating thumbs up. Thank you, whoever that was from. Okay, so Marina and I are here today, next week, and then I also think the Tuesday following. We are excited to present and always excited to come back. I am Libby Woolverton. I work at our friend's place as the non-residential program director. Marina, who are you?
I'm Marina Dewberry, and I work as the SOAR to Success Manager at our friend's place, which is our non-residential program. So Libby and I spend a lot of time together designing and presenting.
We sure do. That also means that we are a little bit goofy from time to time, and apologize for that. But
I
also,
don't apologize.
You're welcome. Maybe both.
You can apologize. I don't apologize because I think we all need a little bit of fun when it comes to topics like this, especially because I just want to take a moment to recognize that a lot of people on this call might have been under some extra stress in the last couple of days with our historic, what people are deeming biblical 24 hours of rain. So just recognizing that that was definitely something unexpected. I didn't have that on my, as they call it, my 2022 bingo card. But just recognizing that, I think we all need a little bit of fun as we talk about boundaries in the workplace, which is everybody's favorite topic, I know.
I'm amazed you still have a bingo card. I threw mine out in 2020. I was like, nope, none of this is real.
It's the same.
It's just... Okay, so we are going to talk about boundaries in the workplace. This is one of those things that for us was really important. And I think often when we talk about boundaries, there's this perspective of like, don't get too close to your clients, make sure that you have, some separation, don't share too much of yourself with them and all of those things. But I think what is often lacking from that conversation is, how do you protect yourself? How do you use boundaries as self-care? Especially in the times in which we are doing our work, and seeing that some of y'all are coming from counseling backgrounds, from service backgrounds, right? That support person background. And so one of the things that we wanted to talk about was not necessarily from the perspective of only share what is appropriate, right? That is that robotic ethics conversation that is almost always had. But how do you as a whole human, right, maintain your humanity whilst also working in really hard times and helping folks who are going through really hard things. And so that is the slant of the majority of our conversation. Marina and I hate talking to a screen. And so please, if you have thoughts or questions, put them in the chat. Marina will be your voice. There are a lot of you, so having you unmute would be hard. But please put your comments, your questions, your thoughts in the chat, and Marina is going to keep a good eye on those and bring them up so that we can have a conversation in that way. Just a little bit about who we are. Besides the two people who are here, we work with our Friends Place, which is a nonprofit in the Dallas area. We have both transitional living centers as well as outreach programs. We are not government funded, which allows for our transitional living centers to be a little bit more open to folks that some other agencies can't serve. We serve young women between the ages of 18 and 24 who aren't pregnant or parenting. While they're with us, they go to school, they work, they learn the life skills that are necessary for building stability in their own lives. And then Marina and I work in our outreach side, our Sword of Success program, which is prevention and education programming for youth, adults, all of those who are experiencing homelessness or living in poverty. But we also come here and talk to y'all. So we call y'all adult allies. Because those of us who are in the helping profession really should be allies with those folks that we are serving. And so we're on their side, we're their champions, we're their support people. And it's important that we also have some educational opportunities and some learning opportunities so that then we can better support not only the people that we serve, but also ourselves. Marina, have I left anything out about what we do?
I don't think so. That was a really great summary.
I've been here for almost 5 years. So
I know.
And I got it down.
And I feel like it's a good lead into what we're talking about, right? Like we have to have opportunities, but because every one of you on this call does such a difficult job, because you care, that's why you do it. That's why it's so necessary for us to have good boundaries, right? For ourselves, because we are not robots, as Libby said. We are whole humans.
Yes. And I think that that's something that we've also learned throughout the pandemic, right? I think that pre-pandemic, we talk a lot about like the before time. That's how we phrase it.
Mm-hmm.
And in the before time, we were work all the time, do everything, keep your head down, make it happen, sort of people, right? And what we've learned through the pandemic is that that is just not a healthy way to live, but be feasible, I think, for the longevity and long term, right? That's where the burnout comes from. That's where the cynicism comes in, right? And so not saying that there isn't something very healthy about gallows humor, but there is a certain point where you still have to really respect the people that you're working with and the reason that you're there. And some of that goes missing when we are working ourselves as if we're robots, right? And so again, we want to bring the humanity back into the workplace, and really focus not only the humanity of the people we serve, but our own humanity. Okay. So when we were thinking about how do we put this presentation together, we started thinking about quotes from different people, quotes that we had heard that really kind of touched us, but like not in weird ways. Anyway, so doing your best doesn't mean pushing yourself to your breaking point. Your best means the best you can do while being the best you. Get enough sleep, give yourself breaks, listen to your limits. Your best is better when you're happy and healthy. Right. So again, about centering that humanity. Your best doesn't mean the best that has ever possibly been done, and therefore you sacrifice your own life and your own health and safety, right? Your best means maintaining you as a whole human being, and then how well you can push yourself, but making sure that you are protecting yourself and your own mental health, your own self-care, your own life, right? Because we are not just the job, we are whole people. So self-care is about boundaries, right? So the whole presentation is this slide. We can be done here. We have more, so stay tuned. But self-care is about boundaries, right? Self-care is not just taking vacation days. It's not just the light at the end of the tunnel. Oh, my dogs are losing it. It's not just that it's okay, I can push through the next month and a half because I have a 3-day vacation coming up in October, right? That is what we often think about self-care, right? Is a one-time kind of infusion of light, and then we go back into the tunnel when we come back. Self-care is scheduled, focused, intentional processes, right? It is something that is every day. It is something that is weekly. It is something that is scheduled on a regular basis. It is focused for self-care, and it is intentional for self-care. And that is then integrated into your daily and weekly lives, right? So self-care is not, I'm going to the beach in 2 months. It's, I work out at the gym, I meditate daily, I journal, I craft, whatever it is that brings you back to center, that you are doing that daily and building space in daily. So self-care is about that boundary that you set for yourself, right? That says this time, whatever this time is, nobody can touch it, right? It is just focused specifically for my self-care. And that is what it is. Marina, go ahead.
Yes. I have found myself, I don't know about anybody else who's listening to this and you're just like, dang, right? Because I think this is a reminder. We talk about this all the time with our clients. We talk about this all the time with the youth we work with, right? But how often do we miss it for ourselves? Because I have caught myself over the last couple of weeks telling people, I'm going on vacation in a couple of weeks. Like, I'm just living for that. I'm just living till I can go on that vacation, going to Portland, Seattle, doing a lot of hiking. I'm very excited being with nature. And Libby and I were talking the other day, and she was talking about like, well, why don't you find ways to be outside now? And I was like, it's hot. it's hot outside. That's why. And because I do think we forget that seasonal depression is not just about rainy days. It's also those days when it's too hot to go outside. It's too hot to do anything. That also contributes to that, right? And so figuring out how to be creative about meeting some of those needs, if that's something, because it's not just, when we think of self-care, we know it's not just mental health, right? It's social health, it's physical health, it's emotional health. All of those things fall into that, our nutrition. And I know that that's another one that I don't know about y'all, that I miss a lot of the time, right? I often find myself, even if I have a little bit of time for lunch, I'm still going to take maybe a couple minutes to eat, right? I don't do a great job about treating myself to that time to be intentional about that practice of eating, right? And so figuring out, that's what we're going to talk about this whole presentation, is how do we do that? Like, what does that look like? Because we're all there, I think, especially when we've talked about kind of the pressure and the emotional impact of yesterday's flooding and the loss and all of that. But that's not where it started, right? It started way before, and like Libby said, in the before times, and it's just continued to be the cycle's just gone on and on as we have lived through a pandemic and social and social and political and economic change, right? A lot of things going on. So it's more important than ever for us to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves.
My dogs are very upset about something happening outside. Marina, I'm going to click the slide and let you talk.
Okay. Work from home probs. Anybody relate? So why is it so hard to set boundaries is a question that I want everyone to take a moment to think about. We're going to start there. I know there's other questions on there, but if anybody feels comfortable sharing, you can put it in the chat and we'll talk through it. Or if you just want to do it for yourself, but I want you to reflect on, why is it so hard for you to set boundaries? I want you to think of the times you have set boundaries and what have you struggled with setting those boundaries, and we'll start there. So give everybody a moment to do their self-reflection, which I know is a lot to do at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. We got a couple responses coming into the chat. So wanting to please people. Yes, I definitely relate to that one. Worried about reactions from others. Same. It's like we are all the same people. And I think these responses are very common with folks that are in the helping profession, right? It's hard for me to set boundaries because I hate to say no or disappoint anyone. I'm such a yes person. Same. Sometimes people don't respect that and it causes tension or problems with coworkers. Ooh, yes, we're going to talk about that. Want to be a team player, right? Don't want to be seen as not a team player. So it's definitely something that is a common concern, right? Because
I was going to add, I think that there's also this fear that like, if I set a boundary, then I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot, right? Then I'm telling people that I won't work that hard or I won't do those things. Which then is my boss going to be okay with that? Not just are they not going to like respect it, but are they actually going to like punish me for it, right? I think is also a fear and concern too.
Yeah, I agree with that. Some other responses real quick are because of the benefits I receive for not setting boundaries. Ooh, I like that. Not like I like that that's a thing. That's a good response. Yeah. Being selfish. Schedule is too full, feeling like you can't get everything done, creating more stress. Yeah. There have been times where I'm like, I just need to finish my to-do list and I'll feel better. Right. Like I just need to get everything done. And then hopes for advancement. I think that's some of the touching on those benefits, right? If I work myself to the bone, I might get a raise. If I work myself to the bone, then I might get a promotion, right? A lot of those things. So what keeps us from setting boundaries and taking care of ourselves? So some more, taking that a step further, right? We already started off with those things that we're struggling with. But what are the worries, fears, and risks associated with this? Do you feel like you can take breaks and take care of yourself? Again, some self-reflection. So when I talk about the worries, fears, and risks associated with what keeps us from setting boundaries, I mean like taking it a step further, right? So for example, the worried about reactions from others or wanting to please people, where does that come from? I know for me, it comes from a fear of rejection, feeling like if I don't do everything right all of the time, if I don't please people, that they're not going to like me or want me to be around or any of those things, right? And so I know that that's something that I have constantly struggled with. Someone said a fear of rejection. Yeah. I want to be seen as being someone people can count on. Yeah.
Especially for those of us who are in the helping profession, right? Like we probably got here because we were people that other people could rely on, right? Like somebody saw in us early on, oh, that's the person I can tell my hard things to, and they won't judge me and they'll support me, which then means that we always constantly want to be that person for someone else, but then to the detriment of ourselves, right?
I'm sorry. I think I lost you for a second.
Sorry.
It's okay. That's me. My computer then popped up the dreaded your connection is unstable, which I know everybody loves to get.
I hate that pop-up.
I know. So, but some of the other responses, I seek approval from my employer. Sometimes I think my worth as a professional is dependent upon the praise I get from them.
Yeah. Yeah, the external versus internal motivation for sure. Yeah.
Ooh, I like this one too. I get a lot of pushback since I've started saying no, even if I say it nicely. Yes, there are times that I do stuff with certain people, even if I've set a boundary, because it's just too much effort emotionally to push back, right? And so there are times I just do it because I just want it to stop. Like I just want them to go away and leave me alone.
If I'm not useful and needed, will I be wanted?
Ooh,
yeah. That's like rejection, but like on a really deep level.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Want to be seen as being able to handle a lot, so I'm not overlooked for growth opportunities. Yeah. So like not wanting to ask for help, not wanting to admit like I'm struggling. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think, we talk a lot about like we always use the phrase like you have to put on your own mask or oxygen mask before you can put on somebody else's, right? And we talk a lot to the people that we're serving about, you have to make sure that you are in a good place before you can help other people, but we don't take that into consideration for ourselves because of all of these fears and concerns and worries and everything else that's going on around us. And then we forget to breathe, right? And sometimes that's metaphorically, but sometimes that's true, right? Sometimes that's real, in a realistic way, that we forget to take deep breaths. How many times have we gone through a day and then realized, oh, I haven't taken a deep breath in a couple of hours, right? I've just been shallow breathing, trying to get through it. And so all of that for sure. To keep us on track, I'm going to move us forward. Okay. No pushback. Eric Holtzclaw said, the breakdown in all human relations is unstated expectations, right? So that breakdown in all relationships across the board is usually related to unstated expectations. And so we have this feeling stuck at 150%, right? For those of us, and it goes to a lot of what was in the chat, for those of us who regularly give 150% to our work every day, we feel like we've created a baseline for our work that others now expect from us, right? If I am at 150% at all times, how do I pull back to being 100% without it feeling like I'm letting people down or I'm not doing my job well or whatever else is there, right? And a lot of folks in the chat commented something similar to this, right? It makes it hard to set boundaries and pull back from that 150%. But also, just like when you set consequences with your students or with the people that you serve, you can always ease up on consequences, but you can't increase consequences, right? So if last time somebody got in trouble and it was just like a, hey, sit down, think about what you did, right? But now this time somebody's done that exact same thing and now their consequences are way more, right? The concern is, well, why did that person not get as much, right? It's the same but flipped, right? So if I've been at 150% for 5 years, right? I've been in my position for almost 5 years now. And I go to my boss and say, hey, 150% is not good for me. I need to pull back to 100%. I just need to give you like 100% of me, or maybe just 90% of me, right? And save 10% for my own life and family. Then that's going to feel like I am slacking, right? And if I don't have that intentional conversation because of that expectation I've set, that unstated expectation, here I am looking like a failure, looking like a slacker, looking like somebody who, for all intents and purposes, just doesn't care anymore, right? And so with work ethics, sometimes it feels like the opposite to that student perspective, right? You feel like you have to maintain that high level of work. And if you pull back for your self-care, it feels like, again, like you're slacking off. Marina, anything to add to this?
I think that a lot of us, I don't like to put words in everybody's mouth, but I feel like a lot of us have been, especially if you are on this call and you are a woman, have been conditioned to put everybody else's needs in front of yours, right? That I can't even remember a time where I gave anything less than 100%, you know? And those times that I did give less than 100% or even 100%, like I felt like I wasn't doing enough, right? Like we are taught that we have to juggle all of these different aspects of life because we are the caretakers of the world, so to say. And I think that really affects us, you know, because we have that pressure to give more than that because our, like, the baseline is giving everything we have, right? And so then that cycle just keeps going because you show your employer, you show the people in your life, right, your coworkers, that you can handle 150%. And so then anytime you do less, you give 115% one day, they're like, what's wrong with you? You know, aren't you, like,
are you sick?
Are you sick? Like, you know, what's going on? And then you feel that pressure, right? Everything we just talked about. You're like, well, dang, like I need to keep going. I need to push through for all of the reasons, right?
Well, and I think, sorry, just to add to that, I think also, you know, we are two white presenting individuals as well here, right? And so for folks of color, right, people of color, there's that old adage of you have to work twice as hard, right? Yes. Just to get half as far, right? And so there's this perspective of having to push yourself even further to prove that you are worthy of the position that you've earned, right? So there's this kind of that again, unstated expectation that everybody is aware of, but doesn't say it out loud. that is even harder, right? And then if you're a woman of color, right, that's even worse, right? And so just also recognizing that this isn't always about work ethic, but sometimes it is also about the community expectations that have been set that are there as well for folks who are just trying to prove that they deserve to be there.
Yeah. And I think, this is true of all women, but especially women of color, that it doesn't feel like we're allowed to have a bad day. Like we can't be grumpy, we can't be upset, we can't be unpleasant, because then we're seen as overly emotional. And especially for women of color, right, who are constantly given things like sassy, like sassy and angry and all of these words just for having normal human emotions.
Right.
And so it just continues.
Yes. Okay, and so we also want to talk about creating a culture where self-care is a stated expectation, right? What are you giggling about? What's happened?
The chat.
Okay.
Sorry, it's not funny. This isn't funny. Someone said, "OMG, Marina, preach it, honey," and that's my favorite response I've ever gotten in a presentation. You're my favorite human now.
That's a great response for sure. Okay, so how do we create a culture where self-care is a stated expectation, right? So we've been talking about that unstated expectation, right? That secret expectation that either we've put on ourselves, society has put on us, the culture of the place where we work has put on us. How do we create a culture where self-care is a stated expectation? And again, this is also within the realm of what you have control over, right? Like we're not going to change society on this conversation. If we could, a lot of things would be better, right? But in the areas that we work, in the areas that we live, in our own families, in our own spheres of influence, how do we create a culture where self-care is a stated expectation? So one of the things that we've started doing, because we've been on this journey as a staff as well, to ensure that self-care is not just expected, but there is space for it, right? So this isn't hey, you should totally take care of yourself. This is what policies, procedures do we need to ensure that you can take care of yourself, and that we are putting it into a regular conversation that we have with each other. So talk with your peers and supervisors. We like to, I can't say I am a very analytical person. I like numbers and I really enjoy scales. And so I like to have that scale of like, I'm doing amazingly to like breaking point, burnout. You might not see me for years because I may just run away in the middle of the night, right? So where are you on that scale? Where are you on the, I love it, I'm great, no concerns, to I might run away in the middle of the night, right? Where are you on your point range there? Reaching out to your team members when you notice them sliding up the scale, right? And encourage them to take a step back and support them through it. This is one of those things that I am technically Marina's supervisor. I say it technically because we have a very different type of supervisor-supervisee relationship than I think happens at a lot of places. But it is not uncommon for her to be like, Libby, what's happening here? I feel like you're reaching burnout. What's going on? Even though she's technically my supervisee, right? This is something that is so much a part of our culture that we call it out in each other, no matter where you are on the hierarchy within our agency, because it is something that we have really created. And honestly, that started with a conversation as a team, right? It started with like little pockets of conversations. And then it started with those pockets bleeding into each other and having conversations with larger pockets. And then it became everything altogether, to talk about how important this is. And one of those things that I know is really helpful as well. And we're at a small agency. We have 10 total staff members now. For those folks at a larger agency and organization, there's a ton of research into how COVID-19 has impacted our ability to be resilient, our ability to bounce back, right? Our self-care. There's a ton of research. And so if needed, if you are working with somebody who requires proof, it's there, right? And it's there from research that happened 3 months ago, right? Not necessarily research that happened 10 years ago. So it's out there, it's real, and it is present. Marina, do you have something to say? I feel like you opened your mouth, but I'm not entirely sure. Okay, good.
So I was like, I can open my mouth, but I
I
was
felt
gonna
like
let you finish.
you were breathing, like you were gonna say something. I'm sorry. Okay, so
I had thoughts, and I think out, like I don't know if anybody else here is a verbal processor, but I
Yes.
struggle with that. And so sometimes, yes, I was like trying to verbally process, but silently.
I love it. Okay. The important thing about calling it out in your team members is, I don't know about y'all, but I don't always notice it in myself, right? We don't always notice it in ourselves that we are reaching a high level of close to burnout, right? We don't always recognize that that's what's going on because we're just going through the motions. We're ticking off the check boxes. We're just doing what we can to survive. And when you are just treading water, trying to stay afloat, right? You can't always see that you could just put your feet down on the ground, right? You can't always see that there might be a support system around you, right? And so having somebody call it out is really helpful. The other thing that's really important is to not do it in a public setting, right? Like it would be really inappropriate for me to be like, so Marina, I feel like you might be getting burnt out here on a group with 66 strangers, right? So that would be inappropriate, right? Also, I think you're doing a great job. Anyway, I think that it's important that we do that in a one-on-one setting, that we do it in a safe and brave space with one another. It is hard to call that out, especially if you've never done it before, right? Because you don't want to hurt the other person's feelings. You don't want to put them on blast. You don't want them, it's kind of like when you're sick and somebody tells you that you don't look good. You're like, well, great, thanks. I know I don't feel good either, but I don't need you to tell me that, right? Like, so you don't want to put somebody in that position, but also they may need it, right? And so that's the difference between calling in and calling out. Calling in is, come on in, let's have that conversation. And calling out is, you're messed up, you're doing a bad problem, right? That's wrong. And pointing it out in front of everyone, right? We want to call people in, right? We want to help them join in the conversation on how to create a self-care plan for themselves. The goal is always to help people to not get at that high level of burnout, right? I don't know about you, but I have worked at places where people just disappeared in the middle of the night. They were alive. They were doing great things. They just never came back to work. It was like, oh, where is this person? Everybody's texting them. They respond to one person. I quit. And it's like, oh, when did that happen? Like, did anyone know? Did anyone notice? Right. And so the important thing is to create a culture where everyone notices and everyone is helping each other. And also using questions like, only when you have space, right? This isn't I'm at 150% and I'm going to take more off of your plate, so I'll be at 170%. This is, I have time, I have space. What can I take off of your plate? Or what can we push a deadline back on, right? What are those things that we can create space and time for the person who is at an 8 or a 9 in an effort to really keep the whole agency at less than an 8 or a 9, right? Because when you have one person who is burning out, everybody feels it. It's a trickle effect.
And what's really hard about this is that what I've noticed from working in the nonprofit sphere is that a lot of this comes from, this is one of the only areas where it is a top-down works, is that if the person at the very top is not taking care of themselves, then everybody under is not going to feel like they can do that either. I just want to call out some things that I know we're not supposed to do that, but just kind of showing some little things that we've kind of done to tweak some of that is we have self-care days that, like I was struggling a couple of weeks ago, and Libby and I had a very similar conversation, like she's mentioning, and she wanted to be polite and not tell you about it, but I'm going to tell you about it because it's me. She's like, I'm not going to put your business out there. And the first thing she asked me was, okay, where do you have time that you can take a break? Like, where can you step back for a moment and focus on yourself? And I was like, I'm good. Like, I'm not I'm fine. It's not work. And she's like, yes, but you are not a robot. That's, she's like, you're a whole person. And I was like, I'll let you know. But then she was like, well, what if you just build in an hour a day? Like, instead of taking a whole day off, you build in an hour here or there or whatever you need. And so it's that kind of stuff, right? Then that comes from, again, our executive director has made that a priority to make sure that our staff are taken care of and that there is not just equal self-care, but equitable, right? And focusing on that and making sure that all of our staff are good, whatever that means. And so there's a lot of conversations about that. But so if that's not something that you see within your organization, that's something to think about, right? Like, how can I help encourage? How can I, it's not your job to do that, but it is, I feel like, a good human thing, right? Because if you notice somebody at the top, and again, like Libby said, that's an uncomfortable conversation to have, especially if you don't have a great relationship with them. But that's something that can build a good relationship, is when you say, hey, I see this in you. Hey, is there anything I can do for you? I know that you do a lot for us, but like, is there anything you need? Right? Because that's what creates that culture. Because that is something that we do because it does come from the top, and we give back to the top.
And I think sometimes also, if you don't feel like you have that relationship with somebody, we all have our work friends, right? We all have that person that we're closer to on our staff. And so calling out that person, or calling in that person to say, hey, these are the things that I'm seeing happening with person B. I don't feel like it's my position or space, or that we have the relationship where I can say, hey, I'm concerned about you here, right? Like, I don't feel like I can say that just yet. How do you feel about having that conversation with them, since you're closer, right? Since you know them better, since you have a better working relationship, whatever it is, right? So sometimes it's also about finding, again, an ally that is also seeing the same level of concern that they can help you with in supporting that person. And sometimes that's your boss working with the executive director, whatever it may be, right? That sometimes there is a, hey, I'm noticing this. I don't know if I'm the only one noticing this, but what do we need to do? How can we help and support?
Yeah. And I want to go back. I was just thinking, I don't know why this popped in my head, but I was just thinking about, we talked a lot on the last slide about the effect it has on women. But I really think that if we're honest with ourselves, it also affects men, because I know tons of guys in my life who don't feel comfortable with taking off time when they need it, don't feel comfortable even calling in sick, view it as like, don't want to be seen as lazy, don't want to be seen as someone who's not tough, right? And so there's also that impact, right? So even I think that's where it can be extra difficult, is when you have a male leader of an organization, and if he has been taught his whole life, like, I have to be tough, I have to be pushed through, like, we just have to do unpleasant things, and everybody just needs to tough it out, that can be also incredibly difficult to figure out as a culture.
Yes, we've all been socialized one way or the other, for sure. Yep.
And it impacts us in different but similar ways, right? Because it's all heavy.
Yeah,
that socialization is heavy.
Okay.
Anybody have any thoughts about this? We talk a lot and have talked a lot, so I just want to do a quick check-in. Maybe think for yourself, where are you at on a scale of 1 to 10? Again, self-reflection time is hard, but sometimes it's what we need.
Okay. If you have something to put in the chat, put it in the chat. Thoughts as we go is great. And it also furthers our conversation along. So, but to keep us on track, we're going to move on to Brene Brown. So daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others, right? So in the chat, we had asked, what keeps us from setting those boundaries? And a lot of the responses were, I don't want to let other people down. I want to be seen as somebody that other people can rely on. All of those, right, are really about risking disappointing someone else, right? And so we really enjoy the way that Brene Brown said this, right? It's having the courage to love ourselves, even in the face of potentially disappointing others, right? And so pushing ourselves through that risk, right? To really, again, remember that we have to put ourselves first, right? Without ourselves, we can't help anyone else, right? And so we have to, again, put our own oxygen mask on first. And that is a courageous step to take, but is also very important. So I see that there are some comments in the chat.
So people were doing some reflection
Okay.
and some deep reflection. And I want, just out of respect to them, I want to share their responses before we keep going. One said, scaling is super important, especially when the scale is personally meaningful. So encouraging an open and honest discussion of symptoms of burnout / compassion fatigue could help with that discussion, like when talking to other people, definitely. I think that's one of the hardest things, is that sometimes those symptoms of burnout and compassion fatigue are really similar to other like depression and other like symptoms. And so sometimes I think those get missed or not identified as like where those actually coming from. And if you don't know where something's coming from, you can't solve it, right? Like you can't fix a problem you don't know. If my house was flooding, I don't know if that's a really terrible example in light of yesterday, so I'm very sorry, but that's what popped in my head. But if my house is flooding and I can't figure out what the water's coming from, I can't fix that, right?
You and I are on the same page, because I also was like flooding, and then I was like, wait, I don't know. I was with you on that one.
I know, right? And then so we got someone at a 7, but with life being busy, it's hard to have time to take off. Yes, I hear all the time, and I've from people in my life that I hate taking off time because it's just like worse when I come back, right? And there are things we're going to talk about you can do to kind of circumvent that a little bit, but yes, it's definitely, that's difficult. Feel like creating some moments in the day to retreat makes it more manageable than taking a week off. Yeah, so like exactly what Libby was talking to me about, like taking an hour, taking 30 minutes, taking whatever you can get to just breathe, right?
Well, and I know that not to like put you on blast either, but I am recalling a conversation hearing that comment with you a few years ago, I think early on in the pandemic, where you were like, I was like, just take a Friday off and stay at home and just like do all the things you need to do at home and just have that time off. And you were like, I don't want to take a day off when I'm not going to go do something cool. Like, what's the point of having a day off when I'm just going to like be by myself at the house? And I was like, it's my favorite vacation. My favorite vacation is a staycation where I can watch the shows, where I can just do all the things and not have to spend a ton of money because I'm just in my own house. And you were like, I'll try it. And then you came back on Monday and you were like, that was the best day. And I was like, great. See, so there are things that you can do that don't require these really massive kind of shows of experience that are also really helpful too. Sorry. I hope you're not upset with me.
I'm not upset. I am laughing. I was at I think when I came to work at our friend's place, I was at like a 9. And so there was a lot of unlearning of some toxic patterns in my life, and self-care was not a thing that existed for me. And so I'm here almost 4 years later, and I've unlearned a lot. I still have a lot further to go, and I think that's how a lot of us are can continue to be, is even if because our needs are ever changing, right? Like, it'd be really nice if they would just stay the same all the time and we could just be, but so unfortunately we're all humans and
keep evolving and changing, and so do our needs.
Terrible. It takes intentionality.
Yeah. Somebody in the comment wrote, I know I'm at a 10, but deciding how and what to adjust seems unrealistic. And I think to Marina's point, I came to our friend's place at a 10. I was fleeing a place that was incredibly toxic and incredibly awful to work at. And so I was also at a 10, and it's just one of those things that's like, let me just keep on chugging along. Thomas the Tank Engine, I think I can, until hopefully sometimes maybe something magical will happen and it'll all be great and better. And that never happened. Something magical never happened. I was lucky to be in a place that was a safe place for me, both work and life. But I think sometimes it's, again, to Marina's point, it's not always this really big, massive, let me change everything. Sometimes it's small changes. Sometimes it's let me prioritize or let me try 10 minutes of meditation every day for a week and see how that changes my day. Let me see if, I can spend 10 minutes journaling. Let me see if I can spend just taking that 10-minute time frame to see what can I do to center myself in the midst of everything else feeling like a 10, right? So how can I come back to who I am and remind myself that I am worthy of that at least 10 minutes a day? And then what are some things that I can shift, right? What are some things that can change? I am not a person who journals. I forget that the journal exists. I buy it and then I look at it and it's really pretty and cute and it has Mickey on it and then I forget. Journaling really helps some folks, right? Whether that's on your phone in a notes app or an actual journal. Meditation has been really helpful for me in doing a quick 10-minute headspace meditation that is guided. You put your headphones on and you just focus on the breathing, right? And remind yourself of breathing throughout the day. Taking that few minutes in the morning, that few minutes, maybe even in the evening before you go to bed, to me, that was a game changer. That was when I started feeling like, okay, maybe it's not a 10. Maybe there are some things that I can prioritize and shift. Maybe there are some things that can change. And I was also in a place where things kind of started here, and then there was a kind of an emergency at work that on like literally day 11 of working here, that we all had to be all hands on deck. And so my level of 10 couldn't shift because we were in the midst of an emergency, right? Similar to in response to COVID, when all of us were at a level 10 because we had to be. But I also think that there are still moments in there that you can bring yourself back to you, right? And setting your own expectation of putting yourself first for even 10 minutes, right? For even just a little bit.
And I think what's important about that, Libby, is that a lot of times we get to 10, like you talked about, like that's like I'm gonna leave in the middle of the night. Like I sit in the parking lot for, before I go in, giving myself a pep talk of like, I can do this, like, think of whatever it is your why is, right? And then that people always say. And then I sit in your car for like 30 minutes after, just like finding the motivation to go home and do whatever else responsibilities you have, right? And so I think building in that time gives you back your ability to like pulls you back a little bit from survival brain, because that's what that is, right? Is us just trying to survive, and allows us to refocus on what we really want. And I think at that point, once you are there, you've gotten little pieces of yourself back, like Libby said, that's when you can make the decision and really evaluate, like, is this the best place for me? Right? Is this something that like I can make changes and I can improve because it's a me thing? Is this something I can have a conversation about? As somebody else said in there, that they set a boundary with their new boss, and it was really scary, right? Because it's always going to be scary when you have to talk through that with somebody that you don't know how they're going to respond and stuff. But I like to give Libby and I are different in a lot of ways. And one of the things is that I like to give people the opportunity. I like to set those boundaries. And if they choose not to respect them, then that makes it easier for me to step away. Right. And so I think that's just part of that process, right? So then you don't have that regret. You have that peace about whatever decision you do choose to make.
There's someone in here that asked, like, what are suggestions for when there is a generational gap between viewing work as life and viewing work as a job, right? And that is a very important question. And I would argue that has shifted for a lot of people, that this view of this is my life, my job is who I am, has shifted even across the generations over the last few years. And there's also a lot of research for like how that's not healthy and how that's not this, that, and the other, right? And for some of those people who view work as who I am, right? Because that's really what you're talking about when work as life, right? That is who I am. I am this job. for those people, sometimes the research is really helpful. Sometimes story is really helpful. Sometimes those pieces are really helpful. But I would push back and say, one of the most helpful pieces of information that I ever received is actually from our executive director, who said once, hiring somebody, training them and onboarding them is a huge expense for an agency or for an organization. And when they get a good person through that process, they don't want to have to spend that money again, right? And so when it comes to setting your expectations and figuring out what's possible, recognizing that your employer doesn't want to have to do another job search, doesn't want to have to do another round of interviews, doesn't want to have to do another onboarding training. Even if it's not a ton of money, it's a ton of logistics and brain thought processes that
And
nobody
time.
wants to do it. We just went through it to hire a brand new person. And it's a lot. It takes a lot from an
Lily,
employer.
if you're on here, we love you though.
We love you and please don't leave us. But that is another piece to recognize that, like, through the onboarding training process, through the interview process, they're looking for a specific individual because they recognize that we aren't robots. But then we get into a working environment that sometimes treats us like robots, right? And so to say, like, you can't just replace me like a cog in a machine. I will also say sometimes we're working at places that treat us like that and will continue to see us like that. And then we have to question whether or not this is the place for us, right?
That's what I mean. Because I don't want us to get, I don't want us to get stuck on like, okay, well, I just need to figure out what I can do. Because it's that responsibility is partially yours and partially that of who you work for.
And I will say, I've done a lot of research into generations and the generational gap and perspectives and this, that, and the other. And being a millennial, I've always hated when people are like, well, millennials are da 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 da. And I think that as we get older and we grow, some of that pigeonholing shifts, right? I know many people of the boomer generation that work is job and family is life, and that is it, period. I just go to do my job and I don't care as much about it. I do everything I can while I'm there and I go home. It's not who I am, it's a part of who I am. And I know a lot of millennials who are, my job is who I am. That is what I have been taught to do. And so I think that we often assume that the other generation blanketed feels one way or the other about something, but having those one-on-one conversations about this is where I'm shifting, right? This is where I am finding that I can be the best employee, right? Is if I recognize that I also have to have my own time, right? And bringing that to a conversation, that one-on-one conversation of calling in and saying, I feel like there's an expectation that this job has to be my entire life. And I am telling you right now, that is not an expectation I can live up to, right? Mm-hmm. And having that conversation, to Marina's point, lets you know where you stand, right? If they push back and they say, well, it has to be your entire life, then that's a choice that you then get to make, right? Because you know the full piece of information.
Yeah.
But it is important to have that conversation and do it in a way that's not demanding or ultimatum-y, right? But is just very much this is what I feel an expectation is here. And that is not an expectation I can do. What I can do is, while I am doing my job, while I am here for the 40 hours that I owe you every single week, because you told me that you would pay me for those 40 hours, I'm going to do everything I can to do this job to the best of my abilities. And any hour past 40, that's mine, right? And so having that conversation with them about, I have to be a whole person. I have to do these things that are important to me. I have a family. I have a dog. I have all of these things that are important to me, right? I have me that I have to also prioritize.
Yeah. And I don't know about anybody else, but I know that I'm not speaking for you, but kind of. Libby and I have had many, many conversations over the last couple of years about what actually brings us joy and what actually centers us, what actually helps us feel more like ourselves, and going back to our values, which someone put in the chat, the best, like, I hope everybody takes a second to read her whole comment, but she talked about taking the capitalism out of self-care, which is a conversation we've had many, many times, right? How to care for ourselves, because treat yourself culture is the capitalistic solution to a human issue, right? Which is burnout. And because burnout can happen in any profession, it's not just the helping professions. I don't know if anybody else has ever heard the really sad statistic that like veterinarians and dentists are like more likely to commit suicide than any other profession. I'm just like, that's sad. I hate that for them. But there's not any burnout and compassion fatigue seminars for them, right? That I know of. I should say I don't know about that, but and then instead of treating it as something we can pick up, that we need to reframe the narrative to be more preventative. And that's what we're here to kind of talk about, right? Is what are those things that you can do? Trying new things. Like I did a self-care bingo activity with some youth that I was working with this summer. And I had them on it. They were like, well, I don't like doing this and I don't like doing that. I'm like, well, scratch it out and put something else. But I really would challenge you to try whatever that is, because maybe you didn't like it at a certain point in your life, or you felt like you had to, or someone told you that would fix everything and it didn't. But it might be something that helps now. And so they all, several of them came back and were like, I did every single thing on there. And I was like, well, what did you think? And a lot of them were like, I was really surprised at how much I really enjoyed doing XYZ. And I was like, exactly. Because a lot of times we as human are creatures of habits. We get used to doing the things that we're doing. And we don't always recognize that, like we were saying, that we're all constantly evolving and our needs change, and that the approaches we take to that may have to shift, right? I was working out a lot pre-pandemic, and now it's harder working from home a lot of the time. It's harder to get there because it's not close to me, the one that I go to, or I don't feel motivated, or I'm tired. So I've kind of shifted to swimming laps in my pool, because I'm fortunate enough to have one of those, even though they make me very sad. And that has made that shift, just honestly in the last 2 weeks, has made a huge difference for me, because I've forgotten how much I enjoy swimming, and it's a challenge, and there's like all this stuff that goes into it, right? So it's about figuring out that instead of worrying about disappointing others, like Brene says, but like figuring out what it is that you need and being brave enough to ask for that. And so we're going to continue for the sake of time.
And I also want to talk about, I would rather, and this is the secret kind of statement in here. Well, it's a secret statement in this quote, right? Like, I would rather disappoint other people than disappoint myself.
Oh, yes.
Right. And so, because I can get over disappointing other people, but disappointing myself is what ultimately gets us to the most burnout, right? Is I put myself aside, and now all of a sudden, I'm empty, right? And so earlier we talked about boundaries are self-care, and we want to just kind of bring that back here, right? So one of our biggest fears with setting boundaries is appearing selfish, but
which a lot of people said.
Right. And without taking care of ourselves, we can't take care of others, right? If we don't put our own oxygen mask on, we can't help other people. If we aren't centering ourselves, right? If we aren't taking those deep breaths, if we aren't calming ourselves down, then we're bringing really excited energy into a group of people that need us to be calm, right? I watch a lot of Cesar Millan and how he helps dogs. And one of the most important things he tells dog owners is center yourself, because the energy you're bringing in is the energy your dog's giving you, right? But it's the exact same thing with people, right? We pick up on energy. So if you're nervous, if you're anxious, if your shoulders are tense, we sense there's something not safe here, right? And if I am here to help you, if you are a young person, if you're a teenager, if you're an adult, and I am here to support you through whatever hard thing you're going through, and I am bringing my energy into that, I am not helping you as much as I can.
Yeah.
Right. And so making sure that we're taking care of ourselves, or we can't actually do our jobs well. It's the same thing in conversations that between supervisor and supervisee. There have been times when I've sat down in a conversation with Marina and I've had my own things going on, and I'm just like this. And Marina picks up on it because she's an empath, and she goes, am I in trouble? Are you going to fire me? What's happening now? And I realize that's me bringing that in, right? That's not her just like spinning her wheels. That's her trying to figure out, why are you so off? And so again, remembering that that's important for us as people in order to help other people, in order to have healthy relationships. we have to take care of ourselves and center ourselves before we can actually do those things. We can't do our jobs if we're empty shells. And again, we have to put our oxygen mask on first. So for the sake of time, we have another quote from Brene.
I hope she's
her.
everybody's favorite, 'cause she's my favorite.
I just really like her sometimes.
She makes, talking about that energy, she just makes me feel good.
Sometimes she says things that hurt me, but she doesn't mean to.
It's out of love.
Calling out truth.
Mhm.
So compassionate people ask for what they need. They say no when they need to. And when they say yes, they mean it. They're compassionate because their boundaries keep them out of resentment. Oftentimes for those folks who are yes folks, who have a hard time saying no, who have a hard time setting those boundaries, they do so under the guise of, I don't want to let other people down. I don't want to hurt other people. I want to be the person that other people can rely on. So I say yes all the time. What happens when you say yes all the time, though, is that your time, your bandwidth is so stretched. It's so minimal that you don't do as great of a job in all of those things you said yes to. Or sometimes things fall through the crack, right? And so then you actually are becoming somebody who's known as not reliable. You're becoming somebody who's known as not doing the best job because you're not saying no when you need to. You're just saying yes all the time, right? And so when you say yes, the question is, do they mean it? Can they actually do it, right? And so for folks who are around you a lot and they hear you say yes a lot, that becomes a question that they're asking. Do they actually mean to say yes, or are they just saying yes because they feel like they need to? Right. And so again, recognizing and centering yourself in, if I am in a compassionate, supportive job, right, and I am a compassionate person, I need to make sure that when I say yes, I mean it, and not just because I feel like I should, right? We can shoot ourselves to death. So say no when you need to, say yes when you mean it. It was a very impactful quote. I know that we talked about it for a minute. Again, that last little bit, right? That boundaries keep us out of resentment.
Which can really, honestly, resentment is the, like, at least for me, is the quickest way for me to get to a 10.
Yep.
Is when I have that resentment towards whatever it is within the workplace.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it's these people are taking advantage of me. These people ask me because they knew I would say yes. These people ask me because they know I can't say no. Or I don't feel appreciated. I don't feel supported. I don't feel all of those things that are important for us as human beings. And that leads to that resentment, which just festers, right? It's a wound that is hard to heal. And so often, again, we pile things on ourselves and put on that strong front, right? I can do it. I'm great. I'm strong. I am capable. I am brave. I am all of those things. But then we get upset with others when they keep asking for things, right? Like we're saying, yes, I could do all the things. Give me all your things. And then they give us the things and we're like, how dare you give me more things? I didn't really mean it when I said it. You should have known that, right? Like I was lying. Why didn't you know that, right? And it's not their fault because we did say, give me your things and I will do the things, right? But we feel like it is. That's where resentment comes from. Also, when we say yes to everything and we aren't able to do our best on those things, whatever those things are that are most important to us, right? Because we've taken on so many other projects, so many other pieces that then we don't get to spend time with our family, with our friends, with that craft, with our dogs, with exercise, right? With those things that are important to us, right? Because we have promised that time to all of these other projects, right? We only get 24 hours a day, right? And when we take on so many things, when we say yes to everything, those 24 hours are still the only hours we get, right? And so time has to be taken from something else, right? So by saying yes to this new project, I am saying no to a full night's sleep. I am saying no to spending time with my niece and nephew. I am saying no to doing crafts or exercise. I am saying no to having a 30-minute meal or an hour-long meal, right? I'm saying yes to a 5-minute meal so that I can just scarf food down and not care about what I ate and just keep going, right? So again, recognizing that you have 24 hours a day, and when you say yes, you're taking time from something else, and that's how it works, right? It's a income expense sheet, right? I have 24 hours. How am I going to spend it? Saying no gives us the ability to really focus on those aspects that are most important or fulfilling for us, right? It gives us some of that self-care piece. But it also helps us to complete the tasks and feel good about the tasks at the same time, right? I don't hate this thing that I'm doing because I know that I'm able to focus and spend really good time on it, right? And so I can feel good about the work that I've done and the end result that I'm turning in. Anything to add, Marina?
I don't know. I wanted to see what the next slide was before, because I don't want to get ahead of myself.
There was one more piece. The resentment that we feel because we don't say no leads to a really awful work environment and culture. And this goes back to something that was said earlier, that when one person is feeling that resentment or one person is feeling that burnout, it has a ripple effect and everyone else feels it too, right? They feel that there's something off. They feel that there's something wrong. And so again, it bleeds into that culture and work environment so that everyone else also feels it and experiences it. If you have any thoughts, any perspectives, please add them to the chat. Marina.
I wanted to see what the next one is because I still don't know if I'm gonna get ahead of myself. There we go. Okay. It's like I was like, I kept wanting to say something like this, and I was like, I feel like that's on the next slide.
Yep. So with that, saying no is self-care, right? So how can we say no when we need to? This is something that I feel like Marina has said that she is a person who says yes. So this is something that I've had to work with her on, and she's gotten way better at it. But how do we say no without a 10-minute monologue explaining why you have to say no, right?
Yeah.
So no, I can't do that. But the reason I can't do that is because I have all of these other pieces that are going on. And also my friend is coming in from out of town and she'll be here for a week. And so I need to clean my house and I need to make sure that everything is set up. And then I need to go and pick her up. And that's why I can't do this thing on Friday. And I'm like, you could have just said no. Just say no. No is a complete sentence. So
someone put that in the chat. And I'm like, are you Libby?
No is an entire sentence. It has a period at the end. This is the only sentence where you don't need a subject and a verb. It's just one word, period, over. Lead with compassion for yourself and others, right? So one of the best things that we can do as somebody who is asking somebody to do something is that when they say they can't do it, just accept that as truth. Don't come up with all of these reasonings that they're liars, they're lazy, they're this, they're that, they're the other. When they say they can't do it, they just can't do it, right? And that's fine. Right? Or maybe they can do an aspect of it. So you have a conversation around it, but accept the no as is. Mm-hmm. And when we accept their no, right, they're more likely to accept our truth later when we're unable to take something on, right? So for those of us who have a hard time always saying yes, sometimes then when we ask somebody to do something and they say no, we're like, well, are you kidding me? Why can't you, right? Even if we don't say it out loud. Sometimes our face shows all the things, right? But accepting their truth and their no allows them to better accept our truth and our no later on. And no is a complete sentence. It is an entire sentence in and of itself. It doesn't need explanation. It doesn't need reasoning behind it. I think that often, again, it goes into I don't want people to feel like they can't rely on me. I don't want them to feel like they can't ask me to do something in the future. So I just want them to know that it's just right now that I have to say no. No. If you are working to the best of your ability, which means you're taking care of yourself while also doing your job well, right? They're going to know that no isn't a always no, isn't a I hate you, leave me alone, no, right? They're going to know that right now, you can't do it, and that's cool, right? No is a complete sentence. Sometimes you might want to offer explanation, and you totally can, but no is a complete sentence. No, I can't take that on right now is perfectly fine. And again, you have to build a culture that accepts no as a possible answer, right? All of us have worked for places where no isn't really an option, right? Like, hey, Libby, can you do X, Y, and Z? And if I say no, I just get a look, because the yes was the only answer possible, right? And it starts with conversations like this one, right? Again, it starts with conversations pulling out those unstated expectations, right? because sometimes those unstated expectations are a part of a culture that is not intended to exist, right? And sometimes it's a part of a culture that is intended to exist, but to Marina's point, until we talk about it, I can't know which is true, right? I can't know the full picture. So it starts with conversations like this. It starts with a conversation with your supervisor or with your team saying, I don't feel like we can say no to requests, right? And talking through, like, is that true? Is that real? Or is that a feeling that comes from something else that we need to figure out, right? One of the things that we found out in our agency is that often culture exists accidentally, right? That the culture, the work environment exists accidentally because one person wanted it this way and they were a strong enough personality that now everybody feels that and everybody experiences that without that expectation being real and true. And so one of the things that was important to us is to pull out those unstated expectations, feelings, and assumptions, and to shine a light on them and say, is this real? If it feels real and has been real, should it be real moving forward, right? Because again, a lot of work culture and environments exist accidentally. And so sometimes your employers, your bosses, your supervisors have absolutely no idea that that is an expectation that you are working under because of somebody who came before them or because of some unintended thing that your supervisor is doing, right? And sometimes your supervisor is like, yeah, you can't say no to things. And that's when you have to have a conversation with yourself.
And some of us need to recognize in ourselves that you can have PTSD from a job.
Word.
And so you can bring that trauma from that past job, like Libby was talking about, she and I talked about, you bring that into your new environment. And so it, as we know with our clients, like it takes dismantling some of that and addressing some of that, confronting, having those conversations in order to be able to heal. Again, flooding in the house, you don't know where it's coming from. Like, I don't know where that came from, that I feel like pulling on the string, like, where's that coming from? What's the root of that? Someone put in the chat that when I started saying no, I treat it as I treat things with my children. I state it and I do not give an explanation. If I give an explanation, people try to fix it so I can say yes. And that is definitely something that, again, Libby and I have worked on because I struggle with that a lot. I have learned that it's okay to say no or yes with a caveat too. That if that makes me feel better, like, no, I'm not able to do that at the deadline you have just, I might ask more questions like, well, when did you need it by? What would it entail? Before I commit to something. So before I say yes or no, and then I may say, no, I can't do that this week. I'm going to be out of town next week. Would it be possible? I could assist you with it when I come back. Libby just got back from a vacation where she was gone for an extended period of time. And there were things she did that with, but she was like, I do not have capacity at this time to work on this, but I will get it back to you when I get back, And so setting those, you can set your own deadlines. And I think we forget that is possible, especially or saying, no, I can't do it at all. Like, you need it by this date. I can't make that happen. Yep. Or like, I will tell them like, well, I'll try, I'll keep you updated if I can move some of these other things and I may be able to make that happen, but I can't promise you.
And there are two pieces that I want to talk about with that. One of the things that really helped our staff is we as a staff set aside time in our own schedules. It was work time schedules to read a book called Scarcity that talked about bandwidth. And that has become a buzzword for us. So one of the questions that we now ask each other is not, hey, Marina, can you do this? The question is, Marina, do you have the bandwidth to add this to your schedule, right? With everything else that's going on in your work schedule, but also in your life schedule, right? Our bandwidth is, again, same as 24 hours. We have a set amount of bandwidth. And depending on the stress that we're under, depending on the pressures that we're feeling, sometimes our bandwidth is more, sometimes our bandwidth is less, right? And so the question is not, can you do this? Can you add this to your schedule? But do you have the bandwidth to do this, right? Do you have the ability to focus and add this in? And which also then becomes our response. I'd love to help you, but I don't have the bandwidth for that, right? And it's not a question that we then push back and forth. It's not a question where we try and fix it. except for as supervisor, then I'll be like, okay, is your bandwidth taxed, right? Is your bandwidth to the point where I need to take something off of your schedule or change a due date on what can we do, right? The other piece is you talked about, we have PTSD from other work environments that we're coming in with. I like to think of it as baggage, right? And so, like I said, I came in from a toxic environment. I was at a 10 when I started at our friend's place. And, but I hadn't really told everybody everything that was going on because it was like really bad and I hadn't processed it. And I tend to forget things that are really bad. I just put them in the awful category and then I process it later. And then I'm like, oh, she said that and I forgot about that. But our executive director pulled me in one day and was like, why do you always run away from me? And I was like, is that happening? And so I finally told her all that was going on. And her only response to me was, this makes a lot of good sense. This makes everything that I'm seeing from you, it makes sense why you are acting in that way. What can we do to help you move from where you are at right now to a place where you feel safe here? And it was a really important conversation to have. And also I had no idea that I was signaling to people that there were things going on underneath my surface, right? I just thought I was like a duck. And everybody's like, oh, she's swimming so well. And that my feet were going crazy, right? But they were seeing the tumult under the water as well. And so I think that is also an important point to bring out, as sometimes once you have a relationship with your supervisor where you feel like you can talk through some of those things from your past, right? Because we bring those in and they become a part of the culture too, accidentally. Bringing those things in, I think, is really helpful in moving forward and having that really positive work culture and relationship with your supervisor as well. Marina, I believe, is looking for the title of the book. That's why she went mute. She'll put it in the chat. We actually really started this presentation after the Olympics. After we saw the really brave, amazing thing that Simone Biles did, right? We started talking about boundaries in this respect, right? Because hearing her talk through why she took a step back, hearing her talk through the importance of that, as well as hearing her say, if I went out there, I was going to hurt myself accidentally, right? And that's not right. I have to put myself first. That was one of those things that for Marina and I was a pause point of, we need to talk more about this with other people, right? Because this is something that was just really telling and important to us. So Simone said, I think it shows strength in the athlete, protecting my mental health and well-being, that I didn't want to go out there and do something dumb and get hurt and be negligent. So I knew for myself that I had to take a step back. Then she added, and that's why we have teammates, because if somebody's feeling down, you have to step up. And they did just that, right? So that team stepped up in a way that I don't think anybody expected them to. I think everybody expected them. Without Simone, they're all going to fail, right? That last point is really important because, again, back to why don't we set boundaries, right? Everyone was like, well, I want to be the one that people can rely on. I don't want to let people down. I don't want to disappoint people. I don't want to this, that, and the other. But that's why we have teammates, right? That's why we have coworkers. That's why we have environments where we aren't the only person that is working there, right? If we are, that is a whole separate situation. But so that you can take a step back and let somebody else shine, right? So let somebody else step up when you aren't feeling your best, right? Because there's going to be a moment where that person isn't shining, isn't feeling well. They have to step up and you have to step in, right? Or step back and you have to step in. So recognizing that that's what true teamwork is. And that is what really makes a really great working environment, is when you feel like there is a team, right? When you feel like, okay, great, Marina, I'm not feeling really well right now. I need you to take the lead on this presentation. She does it. Great. Tomorrow, she needs me to take the lead on a presentation. I do it. Great. That is teamwork, right? Is the recognition that we are not robots. We have so many other things that are going on in our internal lives that are both inside our brains as well as in our worlds that you don't get to see, right? Usually as a working companion or coworker. And so there is a certain point where, again, we have to trust when people say no, but we also have to trust when people say, hey, I'm at a 7 and I need to step back from this presentation. Hey, my bandwidth is taxed today. can you please step into this presentation? And knowing that we can rely on that person to do that as well.
I like the term that you just coined, working companion.
I appreciate that. Really, I just couldn't think of coworker, but
I know, but I liked it.
it.
I felt that, but I really like that you just coined a new term. Everybody write that down. That's a good one.
Okay, so it takes strength to set boundaries, right? Like we said earlier, it is a brave choice to make. It is a hard conversation to have. And a part of that strength, right, is not just internal, but it's also this strength that we have on our teams, right? Which comes from having some of these hard conversations, right? If I've never had this hard conversation with my coworker, then I don't feel like I can say no. I don't feel like I can rely on them to step up, because I don't feel like that connection, that team atmosphere is strong, right? So sometimes we don't say no because we don't trust our team to do the work, right? Our team is not strong enough. Sometimes we feel like, well, it's just harder to explain to them what needs to be done than it is for me to just do it, right? And that is often something that I feel is a lie often, but also is something that we can prepare for, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have an aspect of your job that is hard to learn, do some code training when you are feeling good, right? So that Marina knows how to run reports and data, so that when I am at my wit's end, right, when my bandwidth is taxed, Marina can jump on in, right? She knows how to do it because she's been cross-trained, right? That is the strength of a team, is that they know what you do so that they can do it if they need to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Setting boundaries because you trust your team to do it without you is, again, that's that trust, that's that strength. And then also you have to have faith in them and know that they can do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, it takes strength in yourself and also in your team for that, for sure.
Yeah, Libby and I get pulled in constantly to help with our residential side, and that's not something that's obviously in our job description, but we do that because we have done the cross training. That's part of our onboarding process, is to learn how things work in our houses, what our program needs to be successful, and all of that. And that's something that, oh,
sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good.
I was just going to say, there's a comment in the chat that says, what happens when no one wants to know how to do parts of your job? And that is very real, right? Like, I am very well known on staff to be the Excel person. It's like, how this Excel sheet is broken, Libby, please fix it. I am often, someone we work with says that I do Microsoft magic and Microsoft sorcery, because I can make Word documents, PowerPoint documents, do what I want them to do. And so for that reason, like, that is a niche skill that I have that other people are working on, but there are certain people on staff that is just like, this PowerPoint looks like crap, here, Libby. And that's fine, right? There are times when there are people who just don't want to learn that skill or learn that that part of your job, that piece of your job. Back to Marina's point, that is sometimes a top-down culture that needs to be created and discussed, right? So again, I like to show people the wizard behind the curtain, right? To say, like, hey, there is a perspective that people don't want to learn this part of the job. The problem with that is sometimes I'm out of town, sometimes I'm on vacation, sometimes my bandwidth is taxed, sometimes I can't do that because I'm taking on other roles and responsibilities. Also, what if I get hit by a bus, which is always my like last resort, or what if I win the lottery and I'm out of here because I've bought a sheep farm in Ireland. That's presently where my brain goes for joy, is sheeps. Anyway, it's beside the point. Point is, what happens if, right? Because the ifs are there, they exist, and they are real, right? What happens if I get COVID and I have to be quarantined? What happens if whatever else is happening in the world, right? We're not going to say the other one because it's terrifying. It's gross. Anyway, but what happens if these things happen, right? So that's when you bring it to light, right? Like, there can't be aspects of jobs that there isn't somebody else that can step into, right? That just can't be a thing that happens. So either do we need to have a manual that writes out how to do it just in case, and then nobody has practical experience with it, but they can follow a step-by-step, or have that conversation with your supervisor, or as a team as a whole, to say, like, look, guys, we can't live in a world where that's a thing anymore. Pre-COVID made sense. Post-COVID or current COVID, whatever we are right now, we have to work through and ensure that there are pieces and aspects of jobs that other people know how to do, just in case, right? Just in case, right? People still get long COVID. People are still out for a while. We need to ensure that there is a continuity of care, right? Which means that every aspect of job has to be done well by somebody, right? Or at least so that they know enough of it that they can muddle through. Marina, anything to add to that?
I feel like it can come down to a conversation about what is ethical as provider of services, right? If you are in the helping profession in any way, right? Because that's really the helping profession is massive, right? It's any job that services somebody else. It's our duty to make sure, right? And if you're a social worker like me, then that's in our code of ethics. It's our duty to ensure that our clients are taken care of, and that there is a contingency plan, right? That there is an emergency backup plan. And that's something that I feel like that's a good way to approach it with those conversations with superiors, is that, this is an ethical obligation we have, or I have, if you're the only one on your team who is licensed and has those obligations, like, I have this obligation, what can we do about that, right? Well, and again, stating those boundaries, then you figure out what you need to do from there.
And I'm not beholden to the licensed ethics either, but I think it goes beyond licensure, right? It is a part of an ethical concern when supporting people, period, which means that continuity of care, right, is there at all times. No matter if Marina is gone for an extended period of time on vacation or wherever, right, and is completely out of pocket, I need to know how to do aspects of her job, just like she needs to know how to do aspects of my job, and other people need to know the other aspects of my job to ensure that it keeps going, right?
Yep.
Again, sometimes we feel like we can't say no because no one else knows how to do the work. This is what we've been talking about. We jumped ahead, my bad. So again, that cross education is there. It's important, right? And again, any conversation pulling out those unstated expectations and the recognition that self-care is important to jobs, period, has to include cross education, cross training. And then also sometimes, and I know that this is really hard for those of us who feel a lot of responsibility on our shoulders, sometimes you got to let people fail. Sometimes you just can't care, right? Because you are going on vacation and they don't know about it because they didn't want to get cross-trained and this, that, and the other, and it's going to come up and it's going to be an issue, right? All you can do is control yourself, right? All you can do is control your actions and give people opportunities, talk about the importance of it, have those conversations. And if nobody steps up, if it doesn't become a part of the culture, then you got to go on your vacation. You got to go take care of yourself. You got to go on your staycation. You got to do whatever, right? And they're going to have to figure it out, right? They're going to have to muddle through. They're going to have to do all the training and the research all on their own, right? Until somebody figures out, oh, hey, you know what? It would have been a lot easier if we had just had Marina walk us through this once. Sometimes that lesson, the natural consequence, is important for people to feel, right? When I was a teenager and I stayed out past curfew, I got grounded. That was a natural consequence for my choices and decisions. And as adults, we have natural consequences too, and that's a part of it. And I know that feels really harsh, but it is reality, right? Also,
boundaries are harsh.
Boundaries sometimes, and sticking to them, sometimes there are feelings that come up that people need to figure out. But I will also add as a caveat, for those of us who say yes a lot, what happens when you say yes a lot is that other people don't get the chance to learn and grow, right? So if you have said yes so much that now everything relies on your shoulders, right? I think it goes back to somebody said something like, and I don't know if it was in this training or in other trainings, but like, if I don't say yes to things, then will they keep me, right? Have I proven my worth to stay? And so we get into that perspective. So then it's like, then they can't function without you, right? And you are a whole human being, and the humanity of who you are means that sometimes you get sick, sometimes you need to take a step back, sometimes you need to take care of yourself. But that means that they can't do it without you, because nobody else has gotten a chance to learn and grow too, right? And so saying no is actually what builds strength within a team too, because somebody else has to step up and learn those same skills. With that, it's 11:30, and here are our emails.
Questions, comments? Hi, Ashley.
Hi. Questions, comments, you can put them in the chat. I'll kind of do a little closing thing before you guys head off. So far, I'm not seeing any come through. A lot of thank yous. Yes. Oh, we have someone that raised their hand. Let's see. Kelly Kraser. Kelly, if you could put your question in the chat, that would be awesome. Oh, wrong button. Okay. Well, if you guys love Libby and Marina, we do have them for a series. So they will be back the next 2 Tuesdays. So be sure to go on our website and sign up for those as well. We have conflict resolution and de-escalation in teens, and then code switch messaging in the following Tuesday. So after we log off, you will receive the CEU evaluation. Please fill that out. And their emails were in the end of the presentation. So if you guys do have any questions, you can reach out to them that way, or reach out to me and I will forward them on to them. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, you guys. Have a good day.